What happened in the second half of the Australian Grand Prix weekend? Well, first of all, before we get started on what happened in the second half of the Australian Grand Prix weekend, I would like to introduce the special guest that I promised. I put it in the little announcement. I would like to introduce my championship rival. It is Millard15. How are you doing, my friend?
Hello, mate. It is a pleasure to be finally on the podcast. I've been on the viewers' end of this. I've been watching and listening after every race, and now I finally get to share my opinion and be on the podcast, which I'm grateful for. And I'm excited to talk about Division 2 and Division 1.
Yeah, two very chaotic races it looked like. Yeah, Australia's not afraid of bringing out the safety car, bringing out the VSC after collisions. We definitely saw that this week. We're going to switch it up this week. We're going to begin with Division 1. We usually finish off with Division 1. We're going to switch up this week. And we're starting it with another pole, a third pole position from Teshubi, who is our championship leader in the fastest division. That McLaren, absolutely rapid in that one-lap pace. A little bit further down the order, though, Remote Banjo. Not such a strong qualifying from him. He started in P8, forcing the Red Bull to start on the soft tyres and going for a more aggressive strategy. The race started with the battling being very, very close. And going through that first sector, leading into the second sector, so wiggly, so thin, difficult to hold the wheel to wheel, and both Aston Martins got caught up in that lap 1 incident. They were spinning down to the back. Like I said, the fantastic wheel to wheel you see on that sector with the track limits being so close as well. Of course, we saw that track limits glitch where you cut a corner and it gives you 9 warnings. So there was a lot of post-race pen removals that we saw after the race, but it really put pressure on keeping the other car on the track if you have them next to you. Fortunately, we didn't have any DSQs because of the amount of penalties that were given out. There was a move that was between Zalagi and Banjo that really stuck out to me. Those two were going wheel to wheel so fantastically through that first sector. Zalagi losing his rear on the exit of turn 5, spinning his car. And once again, I think the third race in a row we've seen Zalagi spinning around the wrong way. So that's so unfortunate for Alfa Romeo and their season so far. We go on to lap 6, and after losing P2 to Oliver, the battle up ahead with Neb Restroom, he tapped the wall on the exit turn 14. It wasn't the only time this race as well where he made a mistake like this. Neb did not have the easiest race, that's for sure. And POR Oliver looking very consistent, don't you think? Because he was in the middle pack.
So very surprised by his performance.
It's perfect points for Haas as well, for him to be up at the front. There was a crash, the first safety car of a couple. It wasn't the cleanest race in the world in terms of crashes. And lap 7, it was E9 on his debut in XRS who lost it on the exit at turn 14, putting it in the wall, causing a safety car on lap 14. Every single driver dived into the pits, opting for the opposite tyres that they were on. So if they started on the hards, they go to mediums. If they started on the mediums, they went to hards. Except for one man, Raven West, who went into the pits strapping on the soft tyres. And we have seen this work out previously in Division 4. Of course, we saw Liam and Blake and Locky Docky doing that as well, which did benefit them. So interesting, very aggressive from the Ferrari. Going into lap 10, the most unreal battle between Banjo and Lewis. And then it was all ruined by a surprising little dive from Raven West going into the chicane, absolutely torpedoing the Alpine of Conor Barry. I want to know your thoughts, Mill, on that incident, because that was chaos.
I think overall Raven's, result and his performance sort of overshadows the incident. He recovered from it, as he does. But I think the incident was very avoidable. You said it was on lap 10, correct?
I believe so, yeah.
I think going for a move like that into such a weird overtaking point, especially around this track, I feel like it could have been avoided. He was on the quicker tyres, so obviously, his thought process would have been, I need to get past these drivers if I want to compete for a top spot. But I feel like he could have been a bit more patient, and he could have waited for another corner to get the move done. But nonetheless, he made that decision to send one down the inside of the Alpine, and he faced the consequences. Did he get damage from it? Or was he...
I do believe he did, yeah. He went into the pits.
Yeah.
So that was very detrimental to his race. And it wasn't only him who made a silly mistake. Neb Restroom diving down the inside of turn 11, only 4 laps later, spinning and breaking his wing as well. So that's 2 front runners who pit and were a good 30 seconds behind the rest of the pack.
I think the Red Bulls were, very. They were involved in a lot of battles, and they were very good teamwork from both of them. But I feel like Neb's inconsistency sort of takes away the credit that we can sort of give Red Bull as a team for this race. I feel like if Neb was a bit more consistent this race, then we could talk about Red Bull so highly. But
yeah,
it's unfortunate
we've seen
for
him
Neb.
making mistakes this season, but we'll like I said, we'll discuss that in a bit. It was turn 10 that claimed the Alpine of Conor Barry, putting it in the wall at lap 15, causing another safety car. Now this was very interesting. This safety car changed probably the entire result, because it brought in Raven and Neb, who were further behind, way behind, because of the damage they got on their wings. They both dived into the pits for softs before this safety car, so they were obviously going to be very quick and very aggressive at the back of the pack. On lap 20, the restart began. Neb and Raven were straight on it, cutting through the pack, getting wheel to wheel with everybody, and it got very, very close. There was a point, I don't remember what lap it was. I think it was 21, where the drivers were going through the final sector, and Wizzy and Oliver, who was sitting consistently up in P2, hadn't been touched since he got past Neb earlier in the race. He collided with Oliver, and that was a Ferrari and a Haas, and such valuable points for Haas as well, spinning down the order, allowing Neb, Raven and Banjo at that point to sneak through. Raven was now on the podium, and Neb was not too far behind as well. Yeah, Banjo for company as well. Lap 23, Raven got past Zilagi, who was at this point sitting in P2. It was only Teshubi left that was stopping him from getting this win. What was very interesting about that overtake that I noticed as well, when Raven got past Zilagi, Zilagi defended the Red Bulls. He couldn't stop Raven with DRS, but he could defend the Red Bulls, so they struggled to get past, allowing Raven to catch up with Teshubi. And again, we saw them make contact. So it wasn't huge contact, but there was a bit of wheel clipping, and we've seen these two collide as well back in China last week as well. That battle continued on. All 6 of them, both Alfa Romeos, both Red Bulls, and of course Teshubi and Raven as well. And again, Neb Restream, still constant mistakes. He locked up going into the final corner as well, losing all the positions he made, and actually falling behind his teammate as well, down to P6. So potentially a higher position he could have got, even after the penalties. Going into Sector 1, actually, that lap, it was evident that Teshubi and Zilagi, who didn't pit under that second safety car when Conor Barry crashed, they were on old hards, they were so much slower, and he just got swallowed. He got absolutely swallowed by the drivers on the quicker tyres. Teshubi was spat out in P6 after leading, I think, pretty much every lap of the race. I think he had led every lap of the race.
Sad to see.
Yeah, so that's a huge disappointment for McLaren after just maybe not clicking the strategy on perfectly. Through the ridiculous penalties and in terms of track limits, and after a few penalties after the racing, Raven ended up winning the race with Zilagi in P2, Neb in P3, and a Banjo, Teshubi finishing 5th after the penalties came through.
Yeah, I think Raven really redeemed himself, and he kept his head in the race, and an amazing recovery drive. I think, going back to what you said, the safety car came out later on in the race. Raven pitted, and he was about 27 seconds behind in P11. And I remember watching the race thinking, Raven's surely out of this race. He's not going to catch up 27 seconds. And then I look back, and there's a safety car, and I'm like, oh, right, okay. Raven's back in this race.
Right, so who is your driver winner in this race?
My driver winner is a very interesting one. I feel like most people's selected choice for driver winner would be Raven. Obviously, like I said, he deserved the win. But I've decided to switch things up, and I've gone for Zilagi. I feel like he was the main centre of attention, other than obviously, again, Raven. I feel like he was battling the Red Bulls very well. He was defending them off at times, and it was very good driving from himself. I was very impressed to maintain. He started in P5, and he was in P5 for a while. There was one point where him and his teammate fell down. Both of the Red Bulls got past, and then he got past to bring him in P2, and I was very impressed. So that's my driver winner. What about you?
Driver winner. I just look. I'm gonna sound like a hater.
True.
But I'm going to say it anyway because this is a place of controversy, and I have to do it. I was going to say driver winner, either Raven or Neb, but those two, The only reason they were that far back was purely because of themselves. Raven and Neb, both of them, caused the incidents that caused them to be that far back. And they smashed the strategy by putting on the softs. If anyone in that front pack had put on the softs, fine, they wouldn't have won. They wouldn't have gone even near. But none of them did. So I'm gonna say Raven purely because he did beat Neb. Neb continuously made mistakes even on the softs. So I'm gonna say Raven. But if either of the Alfa Romeos, Banjo or Teshubi, strapped on the softs, it would have been a completely different story. But they stayed out and got the strategy wrong. And as you reflect, actually, I'm going to move on quickly to my driver loser, Teshubi. Because if he just pit, he would have won the race. Because he'd led every single lap up until then. But to not only overtaken by the soft runners, who, by the way, were at the back at the start of that safety car, but to get literally swallowed by everybody and to drop down to 5th, I think it was 6th on track, but 5th after penalties, is... it's just a silly mistake, and it's cost him the championship lead as well. Raven's now leading the championship by 1 point. So... it's just not a mistake that McLaren and Teshubi needed to be making. No offense to you, of course, as the McLaren team principal.
Yeah, well, I'm going to have to agree with you. I've picked the same driver loser, as much as it pains me to. I've gone for Teshubi.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the guy. He's a fantastic driver, but he got the strategy wrong. And I was watching it with a tear running down my face, knowing I should have pitted, man. Should have pitted. I'm sure he's learnt from it. I'm sure he will not make that mistake again, and I feel like he'll, if anything, be more what's the word? More accurate with his decisions. Got there in the end.
He kind of got Verstappen, to be fair. He kind of got Verstappen. Yeah. For my team winner, and I've never done this before. This is a first. I have sat here and doing this podcast since the start of the season, and I'm about to hit you with something that I've never done before. My team winner is absolutely no one. I don't believe that there is a team on this grid that deserves team winner. Everyone's going to say Alfa Romeo or Red Bull, okay? Red Bull, Neb, was so inconsistent. The amount of mistakes that Neb... Fair enough, Banjo in the race was pretty solid. Made a lot of overtakes. He was clearly very confident in the first sector. But he shouldn't have started in P8. He is good enough, especially since he won the race last weekend.
Yeah.
Shouldn't have been in P8 in the first place. Neb was spinning backwards for the majority of the race. Looking at Alfa Romeo, it was Ziagli spun himself at lap 3, so who knows what he could have been. And he also, again, didn't pit. I think he got quite lucky not to get swallowed. I think the only reason he didn't get swallowed is because Neb kept making mistakes and blocking Banjo catching him. He was on 11 or 12 lap old hards by the end of the race. I can't imagine he would have lasted much longer with Banjo behind him. Teshubi was the other driver who didn't pit and just got swallowed. So if anything, like I said, Ziagli probably got lucky that he managed to avoid it. And Alfie got 9 years of penalties and dropped down to like P8 after qualifying, after finishing the race in P2. Go on.
I'm gonna have to explain this, but my team winner is Alfa Romeo.
Yeah.
I feel like Alfie, although he finished in P8, I feel like he showed people that he's quick enough to sort of compete with the known people in the division.
Yeah.
I feel like he was battling with the known people. He was showing confidence, and he had moments in the race where he was very good. And I feel like a P8 was very unlucky. But he had a very good drive. And again, I've talked enough about his teammate. I don't want to sugarcoat him too much. But I feel like both of the Alfa Romeos were very good. There were times where they were in P8 and P9. There were times where they were in P3 and P4. You know, but yeah, Alfa Romeo for me were the best team. Although there wasn't really a standout, like you said.
Who would you say was your team loser then? Do you have a team loser?
Well, I mean, I've kind of spoke a lot about Red Bull, but they're not my team loser. I've gone boring. I've gone for the obvious. Aston Martin are my team loser.
Yeah.
I do not know what's going on in that team. I don't. Are they both full-time Aston Martin drivers?
Only one of them was.
So they had the edits guy, who started in P12 and finished P11. So I mean, I didn't really know much about his race. I mean, he sort of finished where he started.
Yeah.
And his teammate, unfortunately, DNF'd. what it looked like from his own doing. So he's only got himself to blame for that. But it was not a good race for Aston Martin. It'll be one to forget.
Yeah, I've gone for Aston Martin as well, for a few more reasons that I can add on to this. First of all, so they were running a reserve, and of course they were running Edits, who does have a seat. Edits has been having wheel trouble since the start of the season. He's been running on automatic because his downshifter doesn't work. Both of them got caught in a lap 1 incident. A few laps later, then E9111 was the reserve Aston Martin. He crashed on his own to turn 14. Incredibly irrelevant crash. All it did was cause a safety car in terms of he was so far behind. And then Edits finished P11, started P12, minimal points. And for a team and I know I've spoken ill of Mercedes, but they are in a battle with Mercedes in the OCC. Obviously, like I said, I've roasted Mercedes quite a bit. The roasting will continue if they don't improve, but they're still a solid team structural-wise. You can't just think you're just going to overtake them. Aston Martin are going to have to push to get past them. And results like this, where you're scoring literally minimal points pretty much, is not great. Also, in terms of an inside look on Aston Martin, I know that Edits and the team principal Cajun have not been getting on recently. There's been arguments both publicly and privately. I don't know if Edits is going to be in Aston Martin for too long. I reckon it's going to break his contract.
Interesting. Okay, so moving on to Division 2 then. It's a very interesting race. I do want to start off by saying there was no highlights for the Division 2 race due to the no one being available to stream it. So anything me and Avi say, if we've missed anything involving Division 2, it's because of that. We've had to watch over the stewards report clips and what we've seen. I was in the race engineering my driver, so I did get a glimpse of some stuff that took place, but we don't know everything. So if we do miss something or something we say is wrong, then that is because we haven't properly watched the race, because we couldn't. But from what I know, what I saw, it was a very good race. Casper qualified P1. What a shock! I mean, he's a very quick driver. And Nick qualified P3. Nick not having the best of starts to XRS. We were both discussing, and we were saying, Nick, that this is the race where you need to compete with Casper and to prove to people that you can be one of the front runners and compete for the championship. And he did that. He qualified P3 behind Casper. Corbinian qualified P2. And Nick and Casper were both battling. They were within about 5 to 6 tenths for about maybe 15 laps. And Nick was just playing Casper's game. He couldn't get past Casper until lap 15 came. Me and Nick decided, Nick, you're gonna stay out, try and pit onto the softs. And Nick, at this point, from lap 1 to lap 15, was stuck behind Casper in his DRS and couldn't get past him. So the frustration levels each lap are increasing, and come lap 15, I say to Nick, right, start battling, get aggressive. He sends one down the inside of turn 11 and spins both himself and Casper, meaning they're no longer P1 and P2. And after that point, Casper wasn't really in the race up at the front. If I am correct, there was a lot of time penalties, which allowed Casper to sort of climb back up. I mean, the overall race result, he finished P9 because of an incident with Malachi, which gave him a 10-second penalty. But that collision between him and Nick sort of ended his race, really. It did affect Nick, but he was still pushing on. He eventually pitted lap 18 or 19 onto the softs, and he was competing for a podium against the likes of Zinks, Gone to the Moon, and the McLaren reserve. Enough talk about Nick and Casper. Malachi. Actually a very good race from Malachi. He was involved in a lot of action. He was battling a lot of people from what I was watching. And then, boom, another penalty, if I am correct, for moving on to braking. Did he not move under braking in another race?
I thought he moved under braking in China as well, and it's stuff like this for Malachi where he's such an experienced driver. I mean, we've seen that from him, but I mean, it's all well and good. Even the best drivers can make mistakes and collide with someone, or cut a corner, get a driver limits warning. But to break a racing rule, such as moving under braking, weaving on the straight, stuff like this, it's just silly mistakes that drivers don't need to be doing. That's the reason that there are 3 penalty points, 2 penalty points, quite high up, that aren't necessarily big in terms of your track position, but they're big in terms of the long-term effects and getting race bans and quali bans, because they are so avoidable. They are so dangerous as well, let's not forget.
But he's a very good driver, very experienced, and to make silly mistakes like moving under braking and stuff like that is very rare to see from a driver of his experience, but it happens. It happens. It happens to everyone at one point. Okay. So you haven't obviously watched a lot of the race, but
no, yeah.
From what you've seen and what you've heard, who is your driver winner?
My driver winner, and I am so happy to see him fighting up at the front where he belongs. I've gone for Ivaskar, and the reason I said him is that he was moved down from Division 1 after 2 rounds of racing for Australia. Had a bit of a wobbly race in Australia, finished I think outside the top 10, if not maybe at the bottom of it. Not a fantastic start. I believe he reserved for Haas. He then, of course, in Australia reserved for McLaren. To qualify P4 and make it a second row lockout for a team is fantastic, especially a team of the caliber of McLaren, what they're aiming for, not just in the OCC, but overall across the board. To convert that into a podium as a reserve, and as an experienced reserve nonetheless, where TPs know this guy is a Division 1 caliber driver. He knows what he's doing, he's got the experience. This is exactly what I expected to see, moving him down, because he's bringing a whole new level, a whole new threat, a whole new experience to a less experienced division, you could say. And I'm excited to see what he can do and what TPs will be thinking as well, with a driver and a reserve driver.
He deserves a seat, man. He deserves a seat. He does.
And yeah, I'm excited to see what TPs think of this, maybe mid-season. But what about you?
My driver winner, something we've not spoke about yet.
Yeah.
My driver winner is Dodo.
Ooh, yeah.
An unbelievable end to the race from Dodo. There was a safety car late on. Everyone pitted for fresh tyres. Dodo was around P4, P5 if I'm correct. I might not be. His pace towards the end of the race was unbelievable. There was a point where Zinks, by the way, won the race. Started P5, amazing drive from Zinks. He pulled away from P2, P3, P4 by about 2.5 seconds when the safety car went in, and Dodo was stuck behind whoever was in second and third at the time. Dodo eventually got past them, and he caught up to Zinks from the 2.5 seconds, and his pace at the end was unreal, and a very much deserved P2 after qualifying in 7th.
My driver loser, though, I want to say it now because it's linked onto your Dodo point. My driver loser, I've gone for Nick, and it pains me to say because Mr. Flying Slug, he's my boy. He was my first teammate, and he's my favourite driver ever. But goodness me, what a shocker! Qualified P3, that was so good to see because at the time, actually, speaking of a little bit about me, I was in Ireland watching the race in real life with Raven and Five Wise, Moz Megan, of course, is in this division, and Dan, and there was no stream. So we went straight on to Mr. Flying Slug's what's it called?
You were watching his stream.
And we watched because there was no real stream.
Wow.
We were sat there together, huddled around my phone, watching my boy's stream up there, fighting for the podium, and I smiled because I thought, oh my goodness, he's done it. And Nick, I think you can agree, it's been a really wobbly start to the season. We haven't seen what we expected from him. I predicted him P2 in the championship, so that's where the standard was set. And for him to qualify P3, to be fighting up at the front when I saw him, fantastic, very excellent. To see the results, P11, after he quali blocked someone and he's not a driver that makes mistakes. He's a very, very consistent driver, which is why he's in a team like McLaren. To quali box someone, to kill someone is Nick. it pains me to see, and I'm not even in the same team. You know, like he DNF'd in I think it's the China Sprint or something after the first corner with Zinks. It's just not. It's just not classic Nick.
I couldn't decide between two driver losers. So another person who, you know, I know quite well, Corbinian.
Yeah.
Qualified P2. I mean, obviously we didn't watch the race back, so we don't know what happened. He qualified P2, and you know, overall result DNF. Like that speaks for itself. We don't really have to talk about it. A P2 into a DNF is, well, for him, heartbreaking. You know, whatever happened, I mean, there might have been another driver who DNF'd him, or whether he DNF'd himself. I'm sure if he watches this, he'll probably tell us. Going on to team winner. For me, I think it's obvious.
It is. I think it is too.
It's very obvious. AlphaTauri.
Yeah. What a race.
Yeah. Zinks P1, started P5. Gone to the moon, qualified P12, finished P4. You know, a faultless result for AlphaTauri. Like, I mean, there's nothing bad to say about them, genuinely.
I think what I would talk about AlphaTauri for me is that going into the season, I didn't see the AlphaTauri lineup in Division 2 being necessarily bad, but I didn't think it would surprise me like this. Zinks has been unreal in race. I mean, seeing Bahrain was the opener and the standout point for me. He was rapid in the race. The second he got his full traction back. And while it does seem he's slightly track dependent, it does seem. Gone to the moon, again, just poor quality, fantastic race. And I think it's almost the opposite of what I spoke about Corbinian. Get yourself some quality practice, because if he starts at the front, and a driver who was racing you in Tier 4 in KRL, I was not expecting him to be performing this well in a division so much higher. You know, I mean, he's finished this is P4, he's at a P8.
Yeah, he's a very good driver. Like the second I raced against him in another league around Abu Dhabi, like, I knew how quick he was. And you know, he knows I rate him highly.
Moving on to the other side of the garage, I would like to know your team loser, because I know who mine is.
Well, you say yours first, because mine might be very interesting.
Look,
I want to know whether you've gone boring or you've tried to.
Look. There's going to be a short made of this, okay? And Raven had his moment going on Alpine. I'm having my moment going on Mercedes. What is going on in that team? What is going on in the team that had the third most budget in the entire grid, and they're fighting Aston Martin for 7th? Are you joking? I don't understand how Mercedes have absolutely no joy. And you know what it is? The only thing that's separating Mercedes and Alpine, the only thing that's separating I think they're in 7 right now because they're leading Aston Martin, and P10 in Alpine, is that at least Mercedes, the drivers that Mercedes have are good, but they're missing 2 drivers. They've got the smallest lineup of every team. Most of them have got a full lineup. They've got 6 out of 8. Not great. Maybe they're planning something. Have I seen any planning? Have I seen any suggestions that Mercedes are doing something? No. And I see this race, and I know it's a bit more broad. I'm giving Mercedes team loser. I'll give it to Malachi. Malachi, good driver. Why are you moving on a braking? You know, it's a silly mistake that he shouldn't be making. He started 11th, finished 12th. Ronan wasn't in the race. No reserve. Didn't bring him in reserve. And I completely appreciate in the Australia weekend, fine, there wasn't too many reserves. Now that we've had an enormous increase in the amount of drivers in the league, if I don't see 8 drivers
there's
on
no
the grid
excuse.
in that black Mercedes, I don't know what I'll do, because Mercedes, if you remember back, because obviously, like, I don't like to mention them, but you know, in terms of like where this league kind of spawned off, it kind of came off from the end of KRL season 4. If you think back to that, they were literally the team that were favourite to win the OCC. They were the team that everyone was like, oh my god, they're going to beat Ferrari. What is going on? Finally, there's a competition up at the front between McLaren and Ferrari. What is going on? They fell off at the end, almost getting overtaken by AlphaTauri. It's so close, went down to the last race, I may mention. And I thought, okay, it's evident that Tauri are better than Mercedes right now, and they're going faster in improvement. Maybe we'll see some kind of improvement. I don't understand how Mercedes have dropped off quicker than a soft tyre. Like, what is this gradient? that they've gone down to fighting Aston Martin for P7 when they had a lineup, and it's a very similar lineup that they still have now, that was fighting for P1.
My team loser for this race is Alpine. Yes, I've gone boring. I mean, Alpine's one of those teams where they've fallen into a hole and they're living in it. You know, they're not a team. They're not a team that's good. Who's their team principal? Boldy, I believe.
Boldy. Well, it's interesting that you pointed that out, because I was considering putting Alpine as my team winner.
Team winner?
Because, and I'll tell you what,
Oh.
because of how far we went in on them. So Coy and Conehead finished P8 and P10, right?
Yeah.
And given how deep me and Raven went in on dissecting their team, for them to finish P8 and P10, yeah, fair enough. Conehead, ridiculous quali block. That was one of the worst quali blocks I've ever seen in my life. Mistake, fine, sort it out, let's fix it up. Without that 5 seconds, which was pre-race, in the race, they did fantastic. I don't know where he would have finished without that penalty. But you know what? P8 and P10 is the kind of points they need. That's 14 points in total. That's all they need. But what they were doing before was P14 and DNF. This, at least they're getting somewhere, you know what I mean?
It's a step up, but
it's a step, you know what I mean? It's a small step.
They should not be celebrating a P8 and a P10. Conehead qualified P8, finished P8. Koyi qualified P10, finished P10. Look, I mean, they finished where they started. It's an average race. They've both got points, which will be Boldy's main goal. It's a step up, obviously, like you said, from the DNFs. But you've got to sort of have some high standards. You know, yes, you've scored points. Is it good enough points? No, it's not.
Well, as we finalise and finish up the 4th round of the season here in Australia, Mill, what do you think? Overview. Give me an overview of the entire weekend. How would you rate it out of 10? Because what our plan is, right? End of the season, we'll bring back all of these ratings and see which weekend was the best. Out of 10,
Yeah.
what do you rate the weekend so far? Raven did Bahrain, I did Qatar and China. So we've got you, a championship leader. How do you rate the Australian Grand Prix weekend out of 10?
Well, I watched every race, which increases the excitement. I feel like this weekend overall was very good, especially to watch coming from, you know, a viewer's point of view. Division 4, we had the battle between Liam and Lockie, and the midfield battle between Charlie, etc. That battle at the end between my two drivers and Lockie, unreal. Division 3, a comfortable win for myself, and the quali was dramatic. It was, again, a very good race. The battle for P2 and P3 behind me, I'm not quite sure what went
chaos.
on. Seemed very good, very exciting.
On top of each other behind you.
Good's an overstatement, but exciting to watch is the correct word to use. Division 2, like we said, a very dramatic end to the race, a lot of action. Division 1, again, I'm going to make a bold statement here. I feel like this weekend is currently the best weekend of XRS, and I feel like it's going to be the best weekend of the season. I've gone for 10 out of actually, I've gone for 9 out of 10 because I believe some of the drivers abused where they can overtake, and there was a lot of collisions on the same corners. If it wasn't for that, I would have gone 10 out of 10.
Where do we go from here? We head across. It is finally, we can put our legs up and get excited for the European section of our calendar. It's the middle section. We're going to go straight off to Portugal, to Portimao. Your final word from me, just please be careful into turn 1.
Avi, thank you for having me on the podcast.
Oh, thank you very much, mate.
And from screen to screen, thank you to Raven as well for allowing me to take his place. I try not to diss Ferrari at all so I can be on the podcast again. So, you know, anytime you want back, just ask.
Yeah, we're excited to see especially you back on. Of course, this is hopefully a start of a trend of lots of special guests. But of course, put your comments, put your likes in for Miller to be coming back onto the podcast again. I hope to see him soon. See you all soon.
Really, goodbye. Goodbye.